Hi, this is Arden Thornburg and CC Peyroche doing our article critique on Collaborative Learning Studio. This article was actually done by Professor Dabai Lee, which was interesting, and we did want to preface this to let you know, in the spring of 2020, Professor Lee was actually my instructor at Emporia State, the first IT 700 class I took, so I feel a little bit awkward, I guess, critiquing this article, and CC also felt a little bit similar about that situation, but that is where excuse me, we are at. So we're going to get started with the summary. This design article analyzes the utilization of technology and space in a collaborative learning studio. We had a swimming pool that was ultimately converted into a active learning classroom, and research has shown that learners have outperformed peers that are not in collaborative learning systems, and so this study is looking at ways to analyze the effective utilization of pedagogy, space, and technology. Right? They talk about the PST framework that is used to analyze this study. In addition to validating which instructional components are enhanced by the collaborative learning studio, the study seeks to add data available regarding design and implementation of large active learning classrooms. So what does that mean in the short term, or in layman's terms? Really, how do we design active learning classrooms? There is not a lot of research about that, and so this study looks at how we can really design these active learning classrooms. Again, they look at this in terms of the PST framework. Each of these components helps and enhances the other. You can take a look here at pedagogy, space, and technology, and you can see the little cycle, right? Each of these can be used to enhance the other, and in particular, how can you use these components in an active learning classroom to promote active learning? What is entailed with the instructional components? It was divided by lecture, group activities, class-wide discussion, and individual work. So these were the kind of assignments that the students would be taking part in. What was the physical layout, or the space? Here you can see interesting little setup. There were 2 levels. It's actually a very large area. There are several tables on the upper level and on the lower level, 6 chairs at each table, computer, and 2 microphones to try to allow technology to be utilized in here. One thing you can see, a video wall on this component is a 20-foot wide, basically a giant TV screen composed of other screens. So you could look at one big video screen or several smaller versions. So here you can see in a breakdown of what was at each of those tables of technology being used as part of the T, the pedagogy. We had the P, technology, T, the video wall. We kind of talked about what can happen with that thing. And then here we go. There. What is the problem? A lot of the research that has been done about active learning classrooms really details the outcomes, right? How well it worked, and how students were engaged. The problem is that there's not a lot of research regarding how to actually design an active learning classroom and how to utilize the space with technology. So this study looks at analyzing how technology and space configuration can be used to support each of the instructional components that are used in the learning process. Most of the research, again, focuses on learning outcomes and engagement. There is a gap, right, because we do not, again, have a lot of detail as instructional designers going forward. How do we incorporate these things effectively into a classroom? So questions that were analyzed in this study: what types of instructional components or class activities actually support active learning, and how can technology and space be used to support each of these components? The research design, we can take a look here. How can the technology and space configuration be supported, right? I think that was actually supposed to be on the other slide, but the data collection process. Data was collected in 2 different samples, one in 2013, one in 2015. The example in 2013 covered student surveys, faculty surveys, focus group interviews, and syllabi analysis. In 2015, there was a follow-up to work with faculty who had actually taught in the CLS, that classroom, for the previous year. Data analysis was performed in 4 phases. There was an initial review, identification of codes, inter-rater reliability check, and a combination of the results at the end. Our results, as far as question number 1, we came to the conclusion personally that we're not sure that this question was really fully answered. We don't know what kind of activities actually took place in those classrooms. We only know that specifically there, or in the large classrooms, we only know that they did group activities, but what really were the activities that they did in those groups? And, how can that technology actually be used to make that an assignment or an exercise that couldn't be completed in a regular lecture hall? And so we were kind of a little bit out on a limb on that part, thinking, well, it really didn't seem to tell us what activities supported active learning. It really just said, this was the opinion of the participants and the lecturers, not really to give us an example of how those things worked. So question number 2 we felt was answered a little bit more thoroughly, as far as how can technology and space be used to support each component. And the reason why we thought that this question was answered a little bit more was because there were ideas given at the end, at least, that could help future instructional designers, right, design the classroom space. So noticing things like people worrying about visibility of the speaker while that person's speaking. A lot of people wanted to know who was speaking. There were, of course, things that were not as clear on the screen as people would have liked. Some asked for dual monitors, pointers, so that someone could identify on the screen information, or also lamps even that could light up. So I think question 2 we felt was answered a little bit more, because now we have a better idea of how we can design these classrooms. We overall felt that the design was a fair design. You can see here what the design was based on: a convergent, parallel, mixed methods design. There were a couple points of confusion on language used in there on particularly one word, but really overall we felt that the study really does hold up to be valid. We thought that the data collection methods were appropriate. There were a lot of different methods that were used. One potentially faulty area that we kind of figured was that most of this relied on self-reported data. So things like this technology was used in every class, or was only used sometimes. Those are, sometimes subjective when we take a look at the fact that people don't always remember whether or not everything was always used. As far as external validity, we felt that it could potentially be generalized with other studies, but more information is needed again about what are the specific activities that were actually used in those classes. Internal validity is potentially impacted just because there were no randomized groups selected. Participants, as far as we know, were not randomly placed into groups. They were specifically students that had enrolled in a class, and where they were seated at the tables in the groups, there was not a lot of information given around about that. But as far as in construct validity, we kind of question again whether or not question 1 was fully answered. So that part we thought maybe there was some potential flaw in there. But overall, we felt that this could be transferred to other studies, but at the same time, there is potential that um, since this was mainly in STEM classes and in some anthropology, it may not be applicable to all fields. But overall, we felt it was credible and consistent. Um, and we feel it is trustworthy because it regroups criteria of credibility and transferability for the qualitative part. There is more information about lectures and content of activities that we could use to help make a more informed decision. But overall, we felt that this was a well-designed study. It was a little difficult, again, for us to critique doctoral professors that may have been our instructors before, but that is our presentation. Thank you for your time.